He always smiled at his phone during meetings, but never at me. I didn't think much of it, until I saw a message flash on his screen. Last night was incredible. Same time tomorrow. My stomach dropped. That night, I dressed up and walked into his office unannounced. His assistant's eyes widened as she saw me. He's busy. I smirked. Oh, I know. I pushed open his door, and there he was, shirt half unbuttoned, with her. He stammered, This isn't what it looks like. I laughed. Then why is she wearing my missing necklace? I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who got cheated on. I know how that sounds, like I thought I was too smart, too careful, too something to ever let it happen to me. But the truth is, I thought we were solid. I thought we were happy. We had been together for 11 years, married for 8. We had a nice house, decent jobs, a routine. Maybe that was the problem. Looking back, I should have seen it sooner. Daniel had been different for months. At first, it was subtle. He was always glued to his phone, but not in a way that screamed affair. Just little things, smiling at his screen during meetings, texting late at night, keeping it on silent. I chalked it up to work. He was an attorney, after all. Constant emails, clients, deadlines. I told myself that's all it was. Then other things started piling up. He stopped texting me during the day. No more, thinking of you, or how's your day going? The affection just faded. Our conversations turned into logistics, what to get from the grocery store, which bills were due, whether he'd be late for dinner. And he was late. A lot. He started working late more often. Meetings. Paperwork. Court prep. Always an excuse. And the excuses made sense, until they didn't. One night, I smelled perfume on his shirt when he got home. Not mine. A lighter, floral scent. I joked about it. New cologne? I asked. He laughed. Oh, must be from the office. One of the paralegals was spraying something strong. I let it go. Because why wouldn't I? It wasn't like he had given me a reason not to trust him. I noticed the sex was different too. At first, I thought maybe it was just a phase. He was tired, stressed. Then it became routine. Mechanical. Like he was going through the motions but wasn't really there. I asked him if something was wrong. He brushed it off. Just work, he said. I'm exhausted. I told myself that was all it was. Stress. A rough patch. Then I saw the message. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just made dinner. Chicken marsala, his favorite, not that he ever seemed to notice anymore. He was in his office, in the middle of a Zoom meeting. His phone was on his desk, face up. I was just passing by. I wasn't even looking for anything. But then it vibrated. A name I didn't recognize. And one sentence that shattered my world. Last night was incredible. Same time tomorrow. I stopped breathing. My brain struggled to make sense of it. I thought, for a split second, that I had read it wrong. That maybe it was work-related, some kind of misunderstanding. But then reality crashed down on me. I stared at his phone, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The message stayed on the screen for a few more seconds before disappearing. I looked up at him through the glass door of his office. He was mid-conversation, nodding at something someone on the screen was saying. He had no idea his life was about to change. I stood there for a long time, just watching him, studying his face. The way he looked at them, whoever he was talking to, with focus and attention, something I hadn't seen from him in a long time. And I felt sick. I walked into the kitchen in a daze. The smell of dinner, the sound of the TV in the background, the soft hum of the dishwasher, it was all so normal. But nothing was normal anymore. I sat at the table and stared at my hands. My wedding ring caught the light, and it hit me then. He's been doing this while still wearing his ring. While coming home to me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to storm into his office, grab his phone, and shove it in his face. But I didn't. I waited. I spent the rest of the evening pretending everything was fine. I didn't eat. I barely spoke. But he didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care enough to ask. That night, he climbed into bed next to me, kissed my cheek out of habit, and rolled over. Fell asleep like nothing was wrong. I stared at the ceiling, eyes burning, and made a plan. The next morning, I checked our phone records. I had never done that before. Never needed to. But now? Now, I needed proof. The same number. Over and over again. Late at night. During work hours. Weekends. Hundreds of texts, all while he sat next to me on the couch, pretending to scroll through ESPN or some random work email. My stomach twisted. I needed to see it. I needed to catch him. So I waited until the next day. I dressed up, really dressed up. Hair, makeup, heels. A dress he used to love on me, back when he still looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing in the world. Then I drove to his office. His assistant, Rebecca, was at the front desk. Her eyes widened when she saw me. He's busy, she stammered. I smiled. Oh, I know. Then I walked past her, straight to his office door, and pushed it open. And there he was. Daniel. My husband. The man I had built a life with. Shirt half unbuttoned. Hair slightly messy. And her. A woman I had never met before, standing too close, lipstick slightly smudged. She was adjusting her skirt. Daniel's face went white. This isn't what it looks like, he stammered. I didn't speak. Not right away. I was too busy looking at her. She wasn't stunning, not some supermodel. Just normal. And that somehow made it worse. Then my eyes landed on her neck. And I felt my blood go cold. She was wearing my missing necklace. A delicate gold chain with a tiny sapphire pendant. Something he had bought for me years ago on a trip to Italy. The one I had torn my closet apart looking for weeks ago. My hands curled into fists. Daniel followed my gaze and swallowed hard. I walked forward, slow, deliberate. Rebecca, because that had to be her name, didn't it? Shrink back. I reached out, grabbed the necklace, and yanked it off her neck. She gasped. Daniel flinched. I looked at the necklace in my palm for a long moment. Then I turned my gaze back to him. His mouth opened. Closed. He had no words. And neither did I. I stood there, holding my necklace, feeling something inside me crack wide open. Rebecca, because that had to be her name, clutched her throat like I had just ripped out her vocal cords instead of a cheap symbol of my husband's betrayal. Daniel still hadn't moved. He was just staring at me, like he was hoping this was a bad dream. I took a slow breath, let my fingers tighten around the necklace until the metal bit into my palm. Then, finally, I spoke. Tell me, Daniel, I said, my voice eerily calm. Did you give this to her before or after you fucked her? Rebecca flinched. Daniel actually had the nerve to look offended. Jesus, Olivia, he muttered, raking a hand through his hair. Can we just talk? I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Oh, now you want to talk? I took a step forward, just close enough to see the sweat beading at his hairline. Because when I asked you last week why you weren't coming home until midnight, you barely gave me a sentence. His jaw tightened. It's not what you think. I tilted my head. Then what is it? Silence. Rebecca, to her credit, had the good sense to keep her mouth shut. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her eyes were locked on the floor, probably wishing she could disappear into it. I turned to her. You know he's married, right? She swallowed. Gave a tiny nod. Of course she knew. I looked back at Daniel, my so-called husband, the man who had promised to love me, honor me, be faithful to me. And all I could think was, I don't even know you anymore. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Olivia, I swear, it's not serious. It just happened. I could feel the rage bubbling up in my throat, burning hot and dangerous. It just happened? I echoed. Like an accident? Like you tripped and fell between her legs. Daniel winced. Rebecca let out a tiny, strangled noise. I was done talking. I turned on my heel and walked out of the office, my pulse hammering, my breath coming too fast. I didn't even realize I was still holding the necklace until I got to my car. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could have driven straight home. Could have gone inside, packed a bag, called a lawyer. Instead, I did something worse. I called his mother. Daniel's mom, Eleanor, was one of those old-school women who believed in appearances above all else. She wasn't warm, exactly, but she had always been polite to me. And more than that, she loved her son. Worshipped him, even. Which meant this phone call was about to ruin her entire day. She answered on the second ring. Olivia, sweetheart, she said brightly. To what do I owe the pleasure? I forced my voice to stay steady. Eleanor, I just caught your son cheating on me. Silence. For a moment, I thought she might have hung up. Then, very quietly, she said, I beg your pardon? I just walked into his office, I said, staring blankly through the windshield. And found him with another woman. His assistant, actually. Shirt half undone, lipstick smudged. He even gave her my necklace. Eleanor sucked in a sharp breath. Where is he now? She asked, her voice clipped. In his office. Looking like he wants to throw up. Another pause. Then, stay put. And then she hung up. I blinked at my phone. That was not the reaction I was expecting. And then, 10 minutes later, I found out why. Because Eleanor wasn't just going to talk to her son. She was going to do something much, much worse. I was still sitting in my car, heart pounding, trying to figure out what the hell to do next, when I saw Eleanor's Mercedes pull into the parking lot. She parked like a woman on a mission. Got out of the car in her immaculate cream-colored suit. Adjusted her sunglasses. Then she stormed into the building. My mouth went dry. I had only ever seen Eleanor truly angry once, years ago, when Daniel's father had made a snide comment about her spending habits at Christmas dinner. That had been bad. But this? This was going to be nuclear. I barely had time to process before my phone buzzed. A text. From Daniel. Why the fuck did you call my mother? I let out a breathy, humorless laugh. I didn't reply, because just then, I saw the glass doors of the law firm fly open. And Eleanor was dragging Daniel out by his arm. In broad daylight. On a busy street. In front of his employees, his clients, everyone. She wasn't yelling. Eleanor never yelled. But her face was stone cold, her grip on his arm like iron. Daniel was protesting, his face bright red, yanking against her grasp. But she wasn't letting go. People were staring. And then Eleanor turned, looked directly at me through my windshield, and motioned for me to roll the window down. I did. And she said, clear as day, Olivia, dear. Would you like to have lunch? Like this was just another Wednesday. Like she hadn't just publicly dragged her grown son out of his own damn office. I glanced at Daniel. He looked furious. I turned back to Eleanor. Smiled, just a little. Sure, I said. I'd love to. And then I drove away. I followed Eleanor's car through the streets of downtown, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers ached. My heart was still pounding from everything that had just happened. It didn't feel real, like I was in some kind of twisted dream where my husband was a stranger, and his mother was suddenly my closest ally. She pulled into a small, upscale restaurant. One of those places with white tablecloths and waiters who judged you for ordering anything less than a $15 cocktail. The second we sat down, Eleanor folded her hands on the table and looked at me with cool, assessing eyes. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I didn't hold back. I told her about the late nights, the phone habits, the perfume on his shirts, the distant way he touched me. I told her about the message, the office, the necklace. I watched her expression darken with every word. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. I had my suspicions, she admitted. He's been off. That surprised me. You knew. She shook her head. Not exactly. But a mother knows when her son is lying about something. He stopped coming around as much, brushed off my calls. I assumed he was having work issues, but I never imagined this. I took a shaky sip of water. So what now? She leaned back in her chair, regarding me carefully. Well, that depends, she said. Are you leaving him? I swallowed hard. I hadn't said it out loud yet. Hadn't even fully let myself process it. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. I think so, I said. Eleanor nodded, as if she had expected that. Then, after a pause, she said, I hope you burn him to the ground. I blinked. She lifted a perfectly manicured hand and flagged down the waiter. I need a martini, she said. Then, glancing at me, she added, and she'll have one too. I stared at her. Eleanor, you don't even like me. She gave me a small, amused smile. No, dear, I never liked the way my son treated you. There's a difference. I had no idea how to respond to that. And then, because the universe had a sick sense of humor, my phone buzzed again. Daniel, we need to talk. Now. I ignored it. Eleanor saw my face, smirked, and raised her glass. To you, Olivia. And to whatever hell you're about to unleash on my son. I clinked my glass against hers. Took a sip. It burned going down. And I decided then and there, I wasn't just going to leave Daniel. I was going to make him regret ever thinking he could do this to me. The first thing I did was empty our joint bank account. Not all of it, of course, I wasn't an idiot. But I took my half. I had supported him through law school, worked 2 jobs while he built his career. That money was ours, and I wasn't about to let him use a single cent of it on some assistant who wore my stolen jewelry. Then, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, his firm's biggest competitor. A woman named Naomi Baines, known for eviscerating cheating husbands in court. I told her everything. She took the case before I even finished talking. Then I packed my things. I was halfway through stuffing my suitcase when Daniel came home. He walked in like a storm, slamming the door behind him, throwing his jacket onto the couch. His tie was loose, his face red. What the fuck was that? He snapped. I zipped up my bag. Which part? The part where you humiliated me in front of my entire office. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. And you called my mother? What the hell is wrong with you? I turned to him slowly. You cheated on me, I said, voice calm but cold. And you want to talk about humiliation? His jaw clenched. It wasn't. He cut himself off, exhaling sharply. Look, let's take a step back, okay? We don't need to rush into anything. I laughed. Actually laughed. I walked in on you with your assistant, I said. I found her wearing my necklace. How much more stepping back do you think I need? Daniel's face twisted. You don't have to do this. You don't have to. Oh, I do. I grabbed my bag, pulled out my phone, and waved it at him. Already called a lawyer. That hit him like a slap. His mouth opened, closed. His face paled. You're serious? As a heart attack. I brushed past him, heading for the door. But before I stepped out, I turned back one last time. And by the way, I said, your mother is disgusted with you. And then I left. I stayed at a hotel that night, but I barely slept. My brain was spinning too fast, running through everything I had to do next. Cancel the credit cards. Change the passwords. Tell my family. And then, right as I was about to finally drift off, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. I put the phone to my ear. Hello? Silence. Then, a woman's voice. Soft. Nervous. Olivia? My stomach dropped. Who is this? I asked. A pause. Then I think my husband is sleeping with your husband. Everything around me blurred. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped the phone. What did you just say? She inhaled shakily. I found your number in his messages. My husband. He works with Daniel. She let out a small, broken laugh. I think we've both been played. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This wasn't just one woman. This wasn't just some assistant with my stolen jewelry. Daniel had been cheating on me with multiple women. And at that moment, any tiny, broken piece of me that still cared about him, it turned to dust. I sat there, gripping my phone so hard my fingers ached. I need you to say that again, I said, my voice eerily steady. The woman on the other end let out a shaky breath. My name is Lauren, she said. My husband works at Daniel's firm. I found your number in his messages. I swallowed, my throat bone dry. Your husband. What's his name? A pause. Then, David Carter. The name hit me like a truck. David wasn't just some random coworker. He was Daniel's best friend. They had gone to law school together, started at the firm around the same time. Daniel had been a groomsman at his wedding. We had dinner with them, for God's sake. I squeezed my eyes shut. Lauren, I said, my voice thin. How sure are you? I found texts, she whispered. Messages. They've been meeting up for months. At hotels, at work, even at our house once. Her breath hitched. I thought I was crazy. I thought maybe I was just paranoid, but then I found this. A second later, a picture came through. I almost didn't want to look. But I did. And there it was. A blurry screenshot of a message thread. Daniel's name at the top. A message, right there in black and white. Your wife will be at yoga. Let's use the guest room. I clamped a hand over my mouth. I wanted to scream. Cry. Throw my phone across the damn room. Instead, I took a deep, shuddering breath. Where are you right now? Home, she whispered. I don't know what to do. I did. I was going to end this. Publicly. The next morning, I was standing outside Daniel's firm, waiting. Lauren was next to me, shifting nervously. She was small, delicate, like a woman who had been shrinking herself for too long. You don't have to do this, she murmured. Yes, I do, I said. I checked my watch. 5 more minutes. Then, like clockwork, the front doors opened. A flood of suits poured out, associates, partners, assistants. And in the middle of it, Daniel and David. They were laughing, smiling, like they didn't have a care in the world. That wouldn't last long. I stepped forward. Daniel. His head snapped up. His face went from easy amusement to instant panic. David frowned. Olivia? Lauren stepped beside me, her arms crossed. Hi, David. His whole body stiffened. His eyes darted between us, his mouth opening and closing. What are you doing here? I reached into my bag, pulled out a stack of papers, and, without breaking eye contact with Daniel, I let them drop. They scattered across the pavement. Printouts of texts, screenshots, call logs, every piece of proof Lauren and I had found. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People stared. Daniel's face went gray. David reached down, grabbed one of the papers, scanned it. His expression collapsed. Fuck, he breathed. I tilted my head at Daniel. You said it wasn't serious, I said coolly. So tell me. Was it not serious when you were screwing your best friend's wife in his own house? A stunned silence. Someone muttered, holy shit. Daniel took a step toward me. Olivia, let's talk. I held up a hand. We're past that. David turned to Lauren, his eyes wild. Baby, I can explain. Lauren held up a printout. A message in his own damn words. Your wife will be at yoga. Let's use the guest room. She crumpled it in her fist. Explain this. David looked around, like maybe someone was going to save him. But nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then, suddenly, Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. I knew something was off, she said. Heads turned. Eleanor stepped out of the crowd, her expression unreadable. Her gaze locked onto Daniel, and for the first time in his life, I saw fear in his eyes. Mom, he started. She raised a hand, silencing him. Then, in a voice colder than I had ever heard, she said, You're not my son anymore. Daniel flinched like she had slapped him. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Even I was stunned. Eleanor turned to me. Do you need anything else, dear? I swallowed past the lump in my throat. No, she nodded. Then, without so much as a glance at Daniel, she walked away. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. You think you're winning? He spat. You think humiliating me changes anything? I smiled. Then, I reached into my bag again. Pulled out one last document. I held it up. Daniel paled. I already filed for divorce, I said. And since you violated the ethics clause in your contract, I suggest you start looking for a new job. His eyes went wide. Because that's when he realized, this wasn't just about me leaving him. This was about me destroying him. I turned. Walked away. Lauren followed. Behind us, Daniel was still standing there, surrounded by people who had once respected him, people who now pitted him. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. 3 months later, my divorce was finalized. Daniel lost his job. Turns out, sleeping with multiple colleagues and the wife of a coworker was a very bad look. His reputation was ruined. Lauren left David, too. We grabbed dinner last week, toasted to new beginnings. And me? I'm good. Better than good. Because I finally know my worth. And I'll never let anyone make me forget it again.